So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for participating today. Um, I thank Lisa's Care Connection always for letting us share information and trying to motivate and empower caregivers. Let me just say that the job you do as a caregiver is one of the most important jobs there is, and sometimes the most unappreciated. It's easy to feel taken for granted because sometimes you're so far in that forest you can't see the trees. But let's look at some different avenues and ways of approaching things today and taking care of yourself, because you are your most valuable commodity. So first, I wanted to just quickly give you a little bit of background so that you will know that I have worked in the area and I have lived being a caregiver both professionally and personally. Um, Currently, I work for Right at Home. I've been here for almost 2 years now, and I am their director of community outreach and client services. I provide home supervisory visits, and we're one of the few companies in home care industry that actually is Joint Commission certified, that same certification that hospitals attain as well. I do memory screenings. Obviously, I do those for LEEZA'S and other areas as well. I'm also a permanent sponsor for the continuing education credits by the South Carolina Licensure Board. But I've always worked with geriatric patients. That's my love, and their families since 1989. So I always laugh and say, yes, I'm old as dirt, but I'm still going, just like the ever-ready battery. Previously, I've worked for Three Rivers Behavioral Health in Columbia, and then in the Low Country area, I worked for Palmetto Low Country Behavioral Health as a geriatric therapist. My own mother was diagnosed with vascular dementia, so I have lived that on a personal level. And I also have become certified as a Train the Trainer for Dementia Dialogues, and just recently earned my national certification from the Council of Certified Dementia Practitioners. And my passion is sharing resources and techniques with families. I try to be a realist and try to give practical solutions. I'm not one that's big into philosophy and fluff. I want reality, and I want to know what works, and I want to help others. And then, of course, I can't work all the time. So when I'm not working, I can be found gardening, shagging, relaxing with my husband, and my Springer Spaniel named Oakley. So enough about me. Let's look at what we can glean from today's session. I want to help the caregiver to be able to identify the 10 laws of boundaries, because when we set boundaries with people, we tend to get better results and we tend to take better care of ourselves. Also, I want you to learn how to interpret your own resiliency scores. We'll stop and take the quiz, and then we'll learn more information about that and look at what your skill set is during these stressful times. Looking at also how you can strive for emotional health, and then pulling on your own character strengths that will decrease stress and anxiety and increase your coping skills and empower yourselves. So today is all about creating boundaries, balance, and resilience. So as a caregiver, think about it. Identify your own strengths and weaknesses. Becoming aware, being able to state, what is it that you need in order to be emotionally healthy? How can you create balance by increasing your resiliency? So let's look at some of the myths we need to dispel. How many caregivers have thought to themselves, oh, I need to be perfect. I should be able to do all of this by myself. Or caregivers will say, my personal needs need to take a back seat because I need to worry about the person I'm caring for and put them number one. Another myth, I shouldn't talk about what I'm experiencing. And last, I should only have positive thoughts about providing care for my loved one. Every one of these are myths. Nobody, thank goodness, has to be perfect, and no one should have to do it all by themselves. When you put your own needs way behind everybody else, you're actually not at your best and not able to provide the best care for your loved one. It's that old adage of the oxygen mask on the plane and being sure that you put your oxygen on first before you assist the person next to you. And how dare anyone ever say, I shouldn't talk about what I'm experiencing? You are a human being with needs all of your own. And if you are able to talk about those, share those, and glean information from each other, one of the most powerful groups that's ever been on the face of the earth is a support group so that you learn from each other. There's no one that is known to be a scholar. You learn different tricks and different practical ways of dealing with some of the longest journeys possible. And then the people that we take care of are only human and they're struggling. And so it would only be natural for us to not have positive thoughts 100% of the time about them. They're going to have weaknesses. They're going to have different coping strategies as they go through different stages of diseases. So let's look now at, think about yourself. Think about all the people that try to unload things on you, all the family members that expect and demand and delegate. And then all of a sudden you find yourself agreeing to something that you really don't even want to do, or that you're going to do more than you really are able to do, whether it's financial, whether it's physical, or whether it's the emotional toll that it takes on you. One of the gifts that we are all lucky enough to have is a gut instinct. But let me get you to slow down for a minute and think about some of your choices in the past. If you think about it, if you had listened to your gut instinct, you would have made the right decision. But how many times as humans have we ended up making a bad decision because we didn't listen to that little inner voice or that gut instinct that was telling us, don't do that, or don't agree to that, or don't take on more than you can possibly handle. Quit trying to be Superman. Quit trying to be Superwoman. So think about loving yourself, because the more connected, the more in touch you are with what your own inner truth is, the easier it's going to be to use all those outside opinions to your advantage instead of letting them rule your life. Isn't it interesting how everybody has an opinion on what we do or what we don't do, or what we share or what we don't share? So think about it. Everybody in your family has expectations of what they think you should do. So one of the things I always encourage families to do, and particularly caregivers who become the primary caregiver, is to set a boundary. And that boundary can be as simple as an issue of time. I have this much time to help you today. What are your top 2 priorities? Whoever it is that's coming to you, that's wanting something from you, take time to go ahead and find out what exactly is it that they want. Narrow it down. Let them know that your time is of value also, and that you need to be able to limit your time in helping them. How many times has someone agreed to take care of somebody or sit with somebody, and the next thing you know, they're calling you and they're saying, well, I just can't stay the whole time. I've got something else that's come up. Well, is that really fair to you? Perhaps you were planning on doing something during that time. So ask them questions like, you need me to help you with something. Is it life-threatening? Is it a safety issue? Let's just go ahead and get down to the brass tacks. What is it that they're wanting from you? And if it's not a safety issue, or if it's not life-threatening, then coming up with a short phrase to say back to them. I'm sorry, my time is limited today. Or you don't even have to say I'm sorry. You can say, my time is limited today. I can only help you for this much time. So then they may say, well, my time is important too. And you just keep saying the same thing over and over. I wish we had time to role play this today, because you won't believe how powerful it is to repeat the same statement to someone. And after a while, they're going to look at you like, what's wrong with you? Why are you repeating yourself? But if they're continuing to try to give you a reason to why you need to extend yourself and overdo it so that they can have more time or so they can take better care of themselves, you just keep repeating yourself. Because after a while, they will stop arguing with you because they will give up. They will realize they're not getting anywhere they want or need from you because you just keep repeating yourself. Isn't that easy? All right, so let's look at what is emotional health. We talk about emotional health, but what is it exactly? It's not just mental health. Emotional health is a way of looking at the total picture, a total wellness. So it's a combination of mental health, it's a combination of optimum functioning, whether it's your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, but it's also looking at your work, your relationships, and your own physical health. So if we were to draw two circles and we were to intersect them, in the middle would be the word emotional health. And on one side would be work, relationships, and physical health. And on the other side would be thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So emotional health becomes that combination of both. And those are the things that we need to take care of. So I came across this phrase, and I hate that they didn't have a person that I could give this credit to because, of course, it's anonymous. But I want you to remember it because this is how people get taken advantage of. A lack of boundaries invites a lack of respect. It is such a strong, empowering thing to learn how to say no to others. And if you can't completely say no, being able to set limits with them so that you're not taken advantage of. So today I'm going to go over the 10 laws of boundaries, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to also tie that in with the resilience, just so you kind of know where we're going. So the first law is called the law of sowing and reaping, which is simply cause and effect. So the example I'm going to give you is when I was in college, my freshman year, I had a roommate, and every Sunday night, I would get to sit there on my bed, and she was on hers with her phone, and she would call her mom, and I would hear this dramatic event or production where she would call her mom and she would explain to her mom tearfully that she had spent all of her money that week and she needed more money put in her checking account. And guess what? Every Sunday night, her mom would agree to put more money in her checking account. So if you look at cause and effect, she never really got to reap her ill ways of overspending because mom would rescue her and mom would enable her to continue with that behavior. Well, those same kinds of things can happen with caregiving as well. Someone can always be tugging at you to do more, give more, until you have given out everything you have to give and there's nothing left. So if you continue to do that, then you are showing them that yes, they can just take full advantage of you. So sometimes setting limits is so important. The second law, the law of responsibility. What this theory states is that problems occur when boundaries of responsibility are confused. See if you can identify with this. We are all supposed to love one another, but we're not supposed to be one another. So if someone is struggling with their own personal growth, it's really not our job to go rescue them and for us to try to help them with their growth because they're not getting it. We can love them and we can still be a family member to them or a friend, but we don't have to try to fix it. So think about that as far as whether it's a husband, a wife, or a brother or a sister, but that law of responsibility. There are some members of the family that are going to refuse to do any caregiving. They're going to say, oh, I'm not good at that, or I can't do the physical stuff, or you don't want me to cook or do any of that stuff, do you? Or someone might say, oh, I can't handle finances. I don't do my own finances, so I can't do that for our mom or our dad. Well, it's not your job to go in and do it all for every single person in the family. So stick with your comfort zone and think about how if everybody contributed something, whether it was physically, whether it was emotionally, whether it was taking turns with transporting them to a doctor's appointment or grocery shopping, whatever the errands are, divide things up into the family strengths. Okay, let's look at the law of power. Are you powerless over your behavior? And if you are, how can you become responsible? What do you have the power to do? So let's think about it this way. I'm sure you've crossed paths with a caregiver that says, well, nobody else in my family will do it. I'm the only one. So what would happen if you were to get sick? What would happen if you went to the hospital? Even if someone doesn't want to physically involve themselves in taking care of the loved one in the family that needs the care, they could actually contribute, perhaps by paying a home care company to come in and provide services while you go on vacation. If they are uncomfortable with going in person or having to change someone's depends, then they could pay for someone else to do that. It's also important for you to take little baby steps and increase them to bigger steps in saying if you've somehow gotten pigeonholed into being that sole caregiver by typing up an email or sending out a letter or doing a conference call, but letting everyone know in your family on this date to this date, I will not be available. And so since none of you have been able to help up to this time, I wanted to give you ample notice so that you all can start talking and putting something into place, because I will not be in town and I will not be available during this time. If you have to, give them 2 months notice. Let them fret and worry about it, but you hold your boundary and don't not take that time for yourself. Law of respect. If we love and respect people who tell us no, they will love and respect our no. Think about this. If we condemn others, then they're going to condemn ours. What happens with the law of respect is that you get this big fear cycle going, and it makes us afraid to set boundaries with the very ones that we need to set boundaries with. So if we end up complying, and then we end up doing things that we really don't want to do, then we end up resenting them. And the love that we had towards a family member can certainly make us feel resentful. So if you look at the law of motivation, that's where that fear keeps people from saying no to others. A lot of times you'll see this with the elderly. They are afraid to tell their family no. They don't want to be abandoned, and they don't want to lose someone's love, so they just keep doing. Maybe they're doing for someone in the family who everybody else in the family knows that they are able to do for themselves, but that person guilts their mom or dad into continuously doing for them. Or sometimes perhaps someone's got a short fuse. So instead of telling them no, they don't want to deal with the anger part. So they just keep that vicious cycle going. Or think about isolation. All of us have had to feel either small amounts of isolation or great amounts of isolation during the COVID-19. Think about it. It really makes you a little bit leery of not reaching and getting that phone when it rings, or not answering that email, because none of us know how long this is going to go on, or when that vaccine is going to become public. So if you look at saying no to others, sometimes people fear to do that because they worry that they're going to lose that good person inside of them. And some people go on the guilt trip. Oh, I can't possibly say no. I would feel so guilty about it. Think about how payback. Parents, as they're raising children, will sometime attach that string. Oh, if you'll just do this, I'll get this for you. Or we'll go and do that. And so then the next thing you know, those children are growing up to do those manipulative actions. And then sometimes people are afraid that they won't get approval if they end up telling someone no or setting limits. Or maybe they feel sorry for someone because they've gone through that stage and they just can't stand the thought of hurting somebody's feelings. None of those are good reasons to put yourself on the back burner. You are important. Look at the law of evaluation. When you're getting ready to set boundaries and you're going to be responsible to it, you want to look at the effects of setting the boundaries. It does not mean that you should avoid setting boundaries just because someone has a short fuse or someone is overly sensitive. That's their issue, not yours. There is a law of proactivity. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Boy, it doesn't get any more logical than that. I gathered this information and research from a book written by Dr. Clouds and Townsend on boundaries. And so what they say is that proactive people show you what they love. They tell you what they want. They tell you what they are purposing, or what their purpose is, or what they propose and what they stand for. So, you never leave after having met with someone that's proactive. You know when you walk away all about them. You know exactly where they stand with things. And so sometimes, good, bad, or ugly, it's easier to be around those people because you know what to expect. And there's a lot of positive benefits of being that proactive person. So one of the things that they also talk about is the law of envy. Now, all of us have been to parties or been to family get-togethers or reunions or Church gatherings, yes, church gatherings, where you hear someone say to somebody else, well, I wish I had a boat like they do. Or, I wish I just had plenty of time just to pick and choose what I wanted to do. Or, I wish I had a job like that. The reason this is wrong is because when people start talking like that, their envy is defined by what they don't possess. Well, if you are sharing that thought process with people, you're letting them know right up front, oh, I couldn't possibly ever do that. I couldn't possibly ever have that. I couldn't possibly be that, because you're cutting yourself short by making this announcement to everyone that, oh, I wish. If you're making it publicly known, you're negating your own ability to ever have that, whether it was by lottery or whether it was by a fluke or whether it was by intention. So understanding that law of envy and saying, oh, I wish I could do that, certainly lets everybody that hears that statement know, well, you couldn't possibly do it because you're letting everybody know you can't. And it's all because of envy. And envy is not a healthy mechanism. So let's look at the law of activity. Human beings are responders and initiators. We respond to invitations. You responded to the Zoom invitation that Keena gave you today, and we push ourselves into life. Many times we have boundary problems because we lack initiative. Oh, let's let somebody else do that. I'm just overloaded. I just have more than I can handle. Okay, you didn't set a boundary, so therefore you're not able to participate and become involved or do this or do that because you have overindulged in what you chose to do. And then, of course, the law of exposure. According to Doctors Cloud and Townsend, they say that your boundaries need to be made visible to others and communicated to them in a relationship. So let me give you an example of this. I read an interesting article way back in March towards the beginning of the pandemic, and it was talking about husband and wives who were having problems with being stuck at home. Maybe both of them were having to work at home now, and then they had to then spend the rest of the evening together. So what they found themselves arguing and being bitter about things and bickering back and forth about little things. So they decided that they would keep their separate areas during the day when they were working at home, and they would make a big transition for when it was after work hours, as soon as their work day ended. They would either go sit on their porch and they would have something to drink, or they would be in the kitchen and they would start dinner together. But they had to look at each other and they had to say to each other, 2 things that you should know about my day. Wow, what a great start. Because if you can share the 2 most important things that happened to you during that time of day, then the person that's listening can get a quick idea of what kind of day you've had. And they may choose to be more compassionate, or they may be more thoughtful, or they may want to celebrate whatever your jubilation or your tribulation was for that day. So a quick way to say to your spouse, or even if it's a sister or a brother that's coming in to help you take care of your loved one, I just need to tell you 2 things about my day. And then you turn in response and also listen to two things about their day. This couple talked about what a difference that made and how all of a sudden they treated each other differently. And they were able to make the transition into sharing workspace versus being at home. I thought that was a great way to do that. Okay, let's look at resiliency. Why is resiliency important? Nan Henderson has a great website on resiliency, and I would encourage any of you to check out her website. She has looked at what makes someone successful at dealing with life if they've overcome a bunch of trauma or major stresses, or they're currently encountering a crisis. What is different about the people that seem to be resilient? What is it that makes them resilient? So let's look at some of these things. And I will tell you that there's a couple of things on here that if you forget everything you've heard today, there are two things that I want you to remember. And the first one is, what is right with you is more powerful than anything that is wrong with you. This is written by Nan Henderson. I'm going to say it twice because it's so important. What is right with you is more powerful than anything that is wrong with you. Identify your strengths. Use these to overcome your weaknesses. Number 3, and this is the second thing that I want you to remember from today, having patience. Successfully bouncing back from a significant trauma or a crisis takes time. So let's think about way back around March 13th when COVID-19 really started up and all of the restrictions. We were told it would be 2 weeks. Does anybody remember that? And then 2 weeks later, we were told 4 weeks. And then 4 weeks into it, we were told 6 more weeks. So as you're listening to these deadlines being stretched out further and further, it would be easy to just give up, throw it in, just totally be done with it. But on the other hand, if you have patience and you are able to say to yourself, not yet, little more time. And in the meantime, you're looking at your skill set and what can you do to increase your skill set? How can you cope with this a little longer? Being patient is one of the main characteristics of people who are resilient. And then the last statement, a very wise professor taught me in graduate school that if a problem raises its ugly head 3 times, it needs to be addressed. You got to put a system in place to resolve it. Let's take, for example, perhaps you're caring for someone who wanders. You have to be on them all the time. You have to worry about them leaving the house. Well, I'm going to say to you, if they have wandered outside the door 3 times, then it's time for you to put a safety system in place. I would have hoped that you would have looked at it the first time. And I would have hoped that by the second time you had made phone calls or gone on websites or called LEEZA'S or talked to people that you know that are dealing with this issue. Because there may not be a 4th time. So whether it's caregiving issues that raise their ugly head 3 times, or if it's something that might seem minute. Maybe it's the grocery store that delivers to your home, but the last 3 times it's been wrong, or they've shorted your money, or they've substituted something you didn't want. Then perhaps it's time to get that straight. You've been patient enough when it's been 3 times. All right. So now let's look at what are the conditions that people have within themselves. What is that protective factor that gives us resiliency, that helps us cope in times like these? So Kina sent you a test, a little quiz before this, and I also am going to have it on the screen. There are 16 lines where you can answer either yes or no. Obviously, there are some things because of COVID-19 that are applying right now, such as a lot of the socialization questions that we may not be able to answer yes to. Or maybe you can answer yes to it if you're doing Zoom with family members that live across town or with your loved one. But just try in the next, I'll give you 5 minutes to complete this. Try to answer these questions, yes or no, and then tally up really quickly how many yeses you have. And then we'll talk about what that score means. So I'm going to be quiet for 5 minutes and let you answer it. And if you want, you are able to go to the chat room and let Kina and I know when you're through, or you could raise your hand when you're through, or you could just let us know verbally when you're through. So I'm going to put up, so there are 3 pages. So this is the very first one. And so in about 3 minutes, I will move these questions to the next one in case you weren't able to print them for yourselves. Just keep account of how many yeses you have. That's what we'll need to know. Okay. Let's see how everybody's looking. Is everyone done? Oh, good. Okay. We're making progress here. All right. Anyone else done? If you want to unmute yourself and say that you're done, that's perfectly okay. Not a problem. Yes, let me go back to the first page of questions in case someone missed that. Let's see here. Let me move my little box out of the way. Well, let's see here. My screen is not wanting to move. Well, Kina, I wonder if that, Oh, here we go. Let me go one more. I'm sorry. Took me just a second to work on my technology skills. So someone had asked for that first group of questions and they wanted to be sure they had those. I apologize if I was a little fast with the first group. All right. So I hope that that helps. Now, does it look like, I don't want to rush you through it, but I know that we do need to move along. All right. Everybody else good? All right. So if you want to unmute yourselves, I am good with that. And I will go over the scores. So we have a score range. Is there anyone that had 16 to 18 yeses by chance? Anybody that had 3 people. Wow, well, congratulations. Guess what? You should have taught this webinar today because you were already good at setting boundaries and letting people know what your limits are. Outstanding. I wish I had grown up knowing you because I've had to learn this my entire life, and it is so hard sometimes setting limits. So good for the ones that scored 16 to 18 yeses. All right. Anybody by chance score 12 to 15 yeses? Okay. So if you scored 12 to 15, you're in the perfectly normal range because it's a balance. You haven't quite perfected setting limits, but you're pretty darn good at it, and you're still able to take care of yourself. So that's a normal range. So then if someone, and we don't have to identify yourself with this, but if there is someone that has, let's say, a score of 10 or less, then you have some areas you probably want to work on so that you can become more resilient. One of the things that they're going to suggest, and we're going to go to this at the next screen. I have all of a sudden, okay, let's go here. I don't know why my screen's freezing up, but let's go again. Here we go. So if you look at resiliency builders, let's look at the characteristics that you have. Look at the things, the categories where you were really strong at and you had a bunch of yeses, or which ones did you have a bunch of no's? Because you're going to want to look at the ones that you answered more often no to and start working on those. What about relationships? Having that ability to be a friend, to form that positive relationship. Being able to believe in something, a service organization, something that helps others in social causes, giving of yourself. Having a sense of humor. Over and over in a lot of the research that I looked at where they talked about resiliency, not only are those people patient, and not only do they have support, and not only do they have connections, but they've got a great sense of humor. They can laugh at themselves as well as situations. How perceptive are you at looking at situations? Do you have that positive view of the future where the glass is half full, or is your glass always empty? And then one of the strong characteristics of being resilient is adapting to change, being flexible. You know, this pandemic has brought so many people the opportunity to become more flexible, to think outside the box, to look for opportunities instead of thinking of things as being challenges. And then looking at your love of learning. All of you probably scored high in that today because here we are, you're scoring high in the love of learning because you're here. So this kind of summarizes everything that we talked about today. What is right with you is more powerful than anything wrong with you.